Welcome to Issues That Matter. My guest today is my good friend, Scott Ritter. And Scott is going to talk about all of the stuff that's been happening with him. But before we get started, I want to say something. I I I read that Phil Donahue passed away, and Phil Donahue, he had a great show, and his ratings were through the roof, but they canned him because he did not take a pro-war stand. And the first person I remember seeing you on, Phil Donahue, that was the first time I remember, knowing about you. But since then, and since we've started communicating, a number of things has happened. You were kicked off the platform of Twitter. You were placed on a kill list. Your passport was confiscated. Your house was raided by the FBI, and your a book signing was canceled because the owner of the restaurant was getting death threats. And there was an article in today's paper that claimed that they're investigating you for election interference. So, Scott, it, it's all yours.
I mean, clearly, somebody doesn't want me to be saying what I'm saying. Here's the uh, election interference. I'm an American citizen. My
Right.
job is to interfere in elections, and what I mean by that is, if I don't like you in your position, I speak out in opposition to you. It's called free speech. It's protected speech, and one of the main reasons why it's protected is because at the core, the notion of this democracy is the idea that we, the people of the United States of America, get to pick the people we want, and we get to be in opposition to ideas we don't like. So, am I interfering with elections? Just like every other American citizen does. Is
Mhm.
interference when you take a stance against policies you don't like? Are they accusing me of, being opposed to Kamala Harris? Um, are they accused? It's none of their damn business who I support and who I don't support. And if they want to go to war on this one, bring it on, baby. Bring it on. Now, if they're trying to say that because what I write, et cetera, is controlled by Russia, no, it's not. And that's another fight I'm more than happy to have. And if they're trying to say that the Fed, the Judicial Department, the Justice Department gets to decide what a journalist is and what a journalist isn't, how a journalist works, and what, Cynthia, this is very serious because what they're saying is they can take any independent media person, any um, social media activist, anybody who does alternative media off the air because you dare say things that go against um, the official. And here's the thing: when America has bad policy, let's say it's bad policy about Russia, and I oppose this bad policy. And as I pointed out I wrote an article about this the other day in my Substack. You can't have freedom without free speech. Um, I oppose the Biden administration's nuclear policy. I'm definitely opposed to this new nuclear employment plan that they've signed off on March, which just takes us to the brink of nuclear war. And so I write in opposition to it. Now, the Russians, I think, are also opposed to it. So because the Russians are opposed to it and I'm opposed to it, somehow I'm a Russian agent. It's absurd in the extreme. And one of the things I like to do in solidifying the reasons why I'm opposed to it is to talk about how how this policy impacts Russia. What's the Russian opinion of this? What do the Russians feel about this? That's important to know. Cause and effect relationships. These are the kind of probing questions that journalists should be asking. And now I'm being told I can't ask these questions. I can't get these answers. I can't disseminate these answers to people to empower them with knowledge and information. The Justice Department can pound sand, and so can the FBI. If this is the fight they want, this is the fight they will have. This is a fundamental fight of what makes America America. This is a fight that cannot be lost. And for all you people out there that go, I don't like Scott Ritter, He's a blowhard. I don't like Scott Ritter. I don't agree with what he says. I don't like Scott Ritter. He's a jerk. You have every right to say that. Do you like free speech? Do you like being an American? Do you enjoy the concept of a free press? Because that's what's at stake here. It's not about me, although this personally impacts me. This is about everybody. This is one of the fundamental constitutional fights of our lifetime right now. Because if they shut me down over this, they can shut anybody down over anything. It's that easy because all they have to do is demonstrate that you have commonality of ideas. Therefore, you're promoting ideas that are being promoted by a foreign power. Well, that's absurd in the extreme.
But it doesn't necessarily have to stop with social media and the internet. There's people in clusters of friends that are talking about this. You know, they should be worried about their First Amendment rights, even though they're not on the internet, correct?
It's hard. I don't think we're at the thought police state yet where they kick down the door and get you for talking. Um, I think you have to actually disseminate information. But there's a lot of people who are on the internet. Let's talk about the extremes that can go. You can now go to jail for 20 months in England for retweeting.
What?
Yeah. So let's say somebody retweets something that the British government, or somebody posts something on X that the British government deems to fall under the term of hate speech or something like that. And then you retweet that. You just say, oh, I'm going to retweet that. You can be arrested, convicted. And the British have threatened to bring Americans to try and get Americans extradited. Now, here's the thing: is free speech free? Well, in America, if what happens if we determine that no, you can't retweet, no, you can't do this, and yes, our laws now align with the British. This isn't protected speech, so you can be sitting at home. Somebody can post something. Let's say you're opposed to the Israeli genocide in Gaza,
Hmm.
and you're violently opposed to it. And I don't mean you're carrying out acts of violence, but it disturbs you greatly. And somebody posts something like, you know, we need to bring an end to this genocidal, uh, the genocidal state of Israel. I support Hamas. Um, and now the British have determined that that makes you a terrorist. So somebody posted that and you retweeted it. Now, according to the British, you have supported terrorism, and you can be held accountable to that. Now, in the United States, while Hamas is a terrorist organization, simply saying that I support Hamas is not illegal. Now, if you provide material support for Hamas, then you cross the other legal boundaries. That's beyond free speech. You're getting into conduct. But to sit there and say, I don't support Israel, I support Hamas. People can say, I disagree with you. Why do you support a terrorist organization? That's all fine, but it's free speech, protected speech. Not in England, and maybe not in America going forward. So this is a very, very dangerous situation.
Back in the early 2000s, when you spoke out against there were no WMDs, and thinking now, has the has the censorship increased substantially or no?
Well, define censorship. Deplatforming is a form of censorship.
Right.
You basically what we have is when I was speaking out back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the internet wasn't what it is today.
Mhm.
Um, and so I would find platforms, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe. They'd publish my op-ed pieces um, until they were told not to, and so I got deplatformed on that. I was on the Donahue show until MSNBC decided not to. So there was a lot of censorship back then too. Um, it was a different kind. Now we what we have is a similar kind of thing taking place, but on a much broader scale because the internet is a vastly expansive um, mechanism of disseminating information. So you can put it out on YouTube, you can put it out on Rumble, you can put it out on X, you can put it out on thing. But what we're finding is that for instance, the Boston Globe can deny you. They can say we don't want to publish your stuff. But if the Boston Globe had it created a page where it said we encourage everybody to post their material on here, there's a difference. See, they don't want my article to appear in the Boston Globe. They'd say we don't want to print that. But if they open up something that says this is now the new the town hall. This is where people can come and express their opinions freely. But then they come around and say, except you, except you, except you, except you. It's not a town hall. Now people can say that's, it's private, so they can get away with that. But when you cross over and you create something that takes on not just the appearance, but the reality of being a town hall, where free speech is supposed, is encouraged, and the participants believe that that's what's happening. The Supreme Court has said that this is a new realm, that it's not as black and white as just simply say, Twitter is a privately held company, so they can determine who gets to post or not. That's one question. But what's happening also is that the government is now reaching out to these social media platforms and saying you need to shut him down, you need to shut him down, you need to shut him down. And they say, well, we can do that because it's private, but it's government interference in free speech. There was a challenge in the courts, and a lower court held that the government can't come in and do that kind of pressure because that is a violation of free speech. The Supreme Court received the case, they overturned it on a technicality, not on the merits, on a technicality. But since there's no longer a lower court, a court holding, the federal government's come in right now and they are deplatforming everybody. The FBI is showing up at X and at Facebook and at Google and saying we need this. But what the FBI says now is that they're not saying you have to do this or there will be consequences. No, the FBI is just coming because they're so friendly when they show up and they knock at the door and they show the badge and say, "Hi, we're with the FBI. Don't be worried. There's no implied threat here at all. We're just telling you that we're very concerned about this account, this account, this account. This is why we're concerned. And we think it would be a really good idea if you took them down. But if you don't worry." I mean, come on. Having the FBI show up is intimidation automatically. But that's what's happening, the deplatforming of ideas. So the censorship that's taking place today is much more expansive, and it's created more opportunities for the government to violate the First Amendment rights of Americans.
When the FBI came to your door, there was a issue with a SWAT team. I mean, SWAT teams are like, oh my God, that guy's gonna die. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, again, let me just say this. First of all, it's never a pleasant thing to have dozens of FBI agents coming into your house to search it. First of all, just to put a humorous face on it, Cynthia, have you ever invited people into your home for a party?
Sure, yes.
Did you clean up your house before they come in?
Yes.
Because when you want people to come in your house and go, oh, what a nice house you have.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, when the FBI showed up, I had a house that had just had um, both my daughters and their one's husband, the other's fiance, leave after spending a week here. So the house is already tossed. Four dogs who, one of whom's a brand new puppy who's being potty trained. So we got the blue pads all over the house where we're trying to stop accidents. Um, I have ordered books, and I have boxes open with books scattered around. My desk is a mess. The mail is, bottom line is, our house was not ready to receive company. No aspect of our house was ready to receive company. And suddenly we're receiving company that's going through every square inch of your house. So it's that kind of unpleasantness. It's just like, oh, come on, man, let me at least clean up, but having said that, they were very professional, very courteous. and as understanding as they can be under the circumstances, meaning they knew that this was an unpleasant experience, but their goal was not to make it more unpleasant. I've heard stories about the FBI executing search warrants at other places from other people, and it was a much more unpleasant experience for them. For me, it was cordial. I was cooperative. I don't have anything to hide. I made that clear. I helped them out. I mean, I know lawyers are going to freak out, but they came to me. They got my cell phone. And they go, "Hey, could you give us the password to your cell phone to make it easier, or else we have to take it in and break it?" And I said, "I got nothing to hide. Here's my passport." And they're like, "Hey, thanks. I got nothing to hide." There's nothing on that cell phone that's illegal. So you guys are going to get into it anyways. So do it. Can you give us the password to your computer? Yep. Here's the password to my computer. I'm not hiding a damn thing. And I think they were relatively surprised about that. And I told them, I said, why don't you just tell me what you're looking for and I'll take you to it, or I'll say it doesn't exist. But they said, no, we can't do that. We got to search. So, okay, they did it. But before the, and again, the way they executed this, there's different ways that the judge signs off. The judge signed off on this search in a way that said they have to come to my house between this hour and this hour, so it's convenient to me as opposed to coming in the middle of the night. And they said that they have to present the search warrant before they execute it. And so two FBI agents came to the door, knocked. I went out, engaged them. They said they wanted to talk. I said, well, I'm not letting you into my house, but we can talk out here. They said, well, we are coming into your house. Here's a search warrant. And at that point in time, state police and they'll, that was like the signal. As soon as they handed me the document, boom, in comes the army. And they're marching. I mean, they literally, no time, they're marching towards the door. And at the head of them is I think it was about 7 SWAT guys, federal SWAT. They were in their tactical gear and all that. And I got 4 dogs in the house who were freaking out because there's a whole bunch of people coming at my house, and their master, their loyal owner, is outside. And I said, they can't come in until I solve this issue because I don't want these dogs being hurt. And they were as cool as cucumbers. They were like, we understand. And they worked with me and we got the dogs into the back, except for the little one, Iceman, who ran around and wouldn't be caught. So it was pretty hilarious that the guys who were supposed to be clearing the house to make sure there's no threats are leaning out trying to catch this little Pomeranian puppy who's running between their legs and everything. But eventually, they did what they had to do. They secured the house and they left. Very courteous, very professional. No violence, no breaking windows, no ripping things open. Just a very thorough search of the house to make sure that there are no threats to the house. And then the search team came in and they executed the search warrant. And me and the FBI agents sat down and talked. Now, that was the one thing. The thing that was bothersome about this is that the media was there, the whole army of media out in front of my house filming the whole time.
Now, how did they know? Did the FBI tip them off?
That's, I don't know. According to the FBI, they didn't. State police was there, so maybe they monitor state police pagers. I don't know, but they were there, camera people all set up, and they filmed it. And they filmed my house in minute detail. So I'm not happy about it. I'm on death lists. The Ukrainians are actively trying to kill me. And we don't know what that means in terms of insane people out there. But, every feature of my house was featured of my front. If you wanted to talk about how to approach my house, what cover and concealment was, things of that nature, there are no more mysteries. It's there. What kind of security do I have? The FBI disabled my ringtone cameras, but now people know where the cameras are and all that because they can see the FBI doing that. And then they showed my cars, the license plate numbers of my cars, the number of my house, everything. And that night after the FBI left, I got another pounding at the door, and it was a Bethlehem Police Department SWAT team. I had been swatted. Basically, somebody had called the FBI and said that a member of my family was threatening to commit a mass shooting. And so now we have a SWAT team showing up at my house to investigate. But again, hats off to the Bethlehem Police Department. Very professional, very courteous, and very responsible in how they handled it. They understood what was happening. There was no overreaction. They didn't have guns drawn. I mean, maybe they had a sniper in the background. I didn't see covering me, but they were as cool as cucumbers, and we resolved the issue. And I said, I don't want this to continue happening. They said, we understand what's happening, and don't worry about it. Everything will be okay. You don't have to worry about the assault team coming through the door. But it's still unnerving, 11:30 at night, boom, 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 police. What the hell? So yeah, it is what it is. But fortunately, it hasn't happened since then. Or if it has happened, the Bethlehem Police Department has ignored it, or maybe sent a guy to discreetly go by my house to make sure nothing's amiss.
So there was an article in today's Times Union about the FBI, and there were articles right after it happened. What's the lesson that you want to tell people about your situation and what they should know? In other words, should they talk about politics? Whatever it is, what's the lesson that you want to tell people they should know?
Free speech is free, baby. Don't stand up in a crowded theater and shout fire. You can't claim free speech to cover up a crime. But other than that, the lesson here is don't let the government push you around. Don't let the government define what free speech is. Don't let the government define what journalism is. I don't know what the Times Union writes, so I can't comment on that. I have no respect for the Times Union. I have no respect for their reporters. I have no respect for their editorial staff. I can pretty much guess what they wrote. But don't believe what the press tells you. One of the reasons why alternative media is taking off is because the mainstream media has lost all credibility. And this is why you have to support your independent alternative media journalists out there, because if you don't, you're going to be prisoner to the Times Union, to Channel 6, Channel 13, just garbage institutions on how they cover stories. Superficially, responsive to direction from above, literally disseminators of disinformation and misinformation. That's, if you don't fight for your rights, you have no rights. And so what you're seeing right now is a fight for rights. In the Supreme Court back in 1971, in New York Times versus United States, the Pentagon Papers case, where the Nixon administration tried to prevent the New York Times from publishing the Pentagon Papers. The Supreme Court said no, the government can't prevent this. That the government can't hide behind a wall of secrecy when it's deceiving the American people, and that the main purpose of a free press is to hold the government accountable for deceptions that can end up with Americans going to foreign lands and fighting and dying. Right now, we have a U.S. government that is literally deceiving the American people daily about what's going on in Ukraine, about what's going on in Russia. And I have challenged them. And I have said, no, your facts are wrong. No, your analysis is skewed. Look, the U.S. government has admitted that they have declassified intelligence information that they know is wrong, so it can be released to the compliant press for the purpose of getting ahead of the Russian narrative, meaning get it ahead of truth. If something is happening and Russia's telling a narrative about what's actually happening that's inconvenient to the United States, we spread literal lies. That's deception. And the Supreme Court has said one of the core things about free speech is to confront deception head on, get the truth out there, trust the American people to be able to discern between fact and fiction. But do not allow the US government to silence those voices that call them out on their deception. That's what's happening today is the government doesn't want people to call them out on their lies. And because we're in an election cycle where these are critical issues, I mean, look, I'm getting ready to have a rally. Gerald Salanti and I are going to have a rally on September 28th in Kingston. It's going to be a big event, not just there, but we're going to be doing a sequence of podcasts to educate people about a number of issues: nuclear war, disarmament, free speech, democracy. Um, am I interfering with the election, Cynthia, by doing this? Well, I am. I guess if you're the Kamala Harris campaign and you take
Right.
umbrage at what I'm saying, this is stupidity in the extreme. Stupidity in the extreme. So what I would tell people is do not be passive in this. Do not be passive. This is your fight. This is everybody's fight. The government cannot be allowed to interfere in the free speech of American citizens. The government cannot be allowed to impede a free press. And what the government's trying to say is we get to define what journalism is, Scott. We get to decide if you're a journalist or if you're not, if what you're doing is journalism or if it's not. That's absurd.
There's so few people like you, like Tulsi Gabbard, who speak out, and the stuff you hear on TV, I mean, it's all so fabricated, and it's a, a lot of people believe it. How can a few voices like you and Tulsi and a few others change the mindset of people who are inundated with this stuff on a daily basis?
Just speak truth to power and try and put out your narrative, your your version of events, and hope that again trust the American public to be able to discern between fact and fiction. The mainstream media isn't as dominant as it used to be. Um, I have more followers on X than CNN has viewers of some of their biggest shows. So when I post something on X, I have the potential to impact a broader audience than CNN does on some of its main shows. This is a threat now. This is viewed as a threat by the U.S. government because there is an impact. People are listening. People are now starting to question things, challenge things. And when you have, the U.S. government decide that everything is an existential threat, um, and that national security is at stake here. Again, the Supreme Court has said over and over and over again that you cannot allow the government to start creating, national security excuses for the violation of civil liberties, of civil rights, of free speech, of a free press. But that's what's happening right now. Because when people like me and Tulsi Gabbard, people with a background, with experience, start challenging the narrative, and we can cite facts, we can cite, logic in a way that uh, enhances our criticism, we now become a threat to the national security of the United States as defined by politicized elements within Department of Justice. No, yeah, you can't spy. I mean, if I were out there committing espionage, I should be locked up and thrown to jail. The key should be thrown away. And you know, I question, the Foreign Agent Registration Act. When they say I can't act on behalf of the Russian government, I'm not. But I think we become, if somebody says, the Russian government told me this, and I'm repeating it, and I believe in this and all that, um, we're starting to brush up against free speech. But if they want to say, okay, these are the limitations, you can say what you say, but you have to declare that you're being directed by and you're acting on behalf of the Russian government. Okay, but I'm not. A journalist isn't acting on behalf of their source, are they?
Mhm.
If you interview me, if you want to find out about how Scott Ritter grows tomatoes in his backyard, and you interview me and you write an article that says this is how Scott Ritter grows potatoes or tomatoes in his backyard, are you taking direction from me? No, you decided you want to do the interview. You interviewed me, and now you're telling the story the way you want to tell it. Um, it's not acting on my behalf or taking direction from me. You have a source. If I go to the Russian embassy and I meet with the Russian ambassador and I have a lengthy conversation about arms control and the Russian perspectives on arms control, then I come back and I write an article about it and I do podcasts about it. Am I taking direction from the Russian ambassador? Am I taking direction from the Russian government? Or am I a journalist doing an investigation and I've interviewed a source and now I'm informing people what the source said? This, it's not even a fine line here. The US government has no right to tell me as a journalist who I can talk to and what I can report on. No right.
Do you have tomatoes in your backyard?
My wife has grown some, yes, not because of me, in spite of me. I am the anti-green thumb, but you
Did you have a good garden this year?
we had a better garden this year. We were a little worried
Really?
about the amount of rainfall and what it could do and such, but surprisingly, once we got past that very wet planting season, the things that were supposed to grow grew, and
Mm,
we actually have enhanced our diet because of it.
great, great. So tell us a little bit about your upcoming events. The demonstration on the 28th. How's your book coming along, your new book?
Well, the new book is covering Ukraine. The Scott Ritter Reviews through the eyes of Anya Kay. According to the U.S. government, this is Russian propaganda. According to the U.S. government, they don't want you to read this. According to the U.S. government, if you read this book and learn about an alternative narrative about the Ukraine conflict, you're interfering with American elections. So buy this book and tell the U.S. government to stick it in their ear. Um, you know, or borrow the book from somebody who bought it. I don't care, but read the book and find out what the U.S. government doesn't want you to find out. Their rating of this house, and I told them this, it has a chilling effect because there's people out there who say, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. So when they raid the house, there has to be some underlying reason. And now we don't trust Scott Ritter anymore, if they ever did. And then maybe I don't want to buy his book. It has a chilling effect across the board. Across the board. That's what the government wants to happen. Understand this. They have not charged me with anything. They have not articulated any allegations. They came in, they did something very publicly, then they left. And now what happens is you get this slow leak of news articles where they say, well, the government is looking potentially to press criminal charges. The government's worried about election interference. Really? How? Why in God's name, if you're a reporter, would you repeat that? If the government hasn't said, we're accusing Scott Ritter of doing X, Y, and Z. See, now what's happened is the government went out there and they raided, they created, this notion, and then they leak things that have nothing to do with me, or at least don't directly implicate me. But now these journalists link them together and they run with it. And it has a chilling effect. It has a chilling effect. So, warm yourself up, build a fire under this chill that the FBI did, and buy the book and find
And
out what the U.S. government doesn't want you to read. Because the reason why they raided the house is they don't want you to read this book. They don't want you to read what I write. They don't want you to watch this podcast. They don't want any of this happening because this conversation you and I are having right now, Cynthia, apparently is election interference. Because I'm going to tell you that Kamala Harris doesn't have a policy of peace. I'm going to tell you that if you vote for Donald Trump, you're going to get a continuation of the genocide in Syria. I'm going to tell you that neither party has a plan for preventing the outbreak of World War III in the coming years. And apparently, me talking about these very critical issues, which every American should be engaged in, is somehow election interference.
yes, the scary part about this is there's been all kinds of conflicts since the beginning of time, but since 1945 to the present, there's the danger of this entire planet being exterminated. And to me, that's frightening. And I think everybody should be aware of that, right?
I think so. That's one of the driving functions behind September 28th is to, to try and empower the vote, make people understand that they shouldn't give their vote away. They should make politicians earn their vote by defining issues of importance and demanding that the politicians articulate a platform that addresses these issues so they can best decide who I want. Oh God, I just interfered with the elections again, Cynthia. Geez, apparently I can't do my civic responsibility as an American citizen to hold elected officials accountable for what they do in the name and make sure that before I vote for somebody, I understand what they represent and that I vote for the person that best mirrors what I believe in. Oh, I'm interfering with elections again, Cynthia.
Oh, wow, right? So I'm gonna say goodbye because I'm taking a weekend trip down to Woodstock. Um, so you've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And because this particular podcast is so important, not like, all of them have been, but when your First Amendment rights are infringed upon, that's a pretty scary thing. So everybody listening to this, if they could share this on any of their um social media platforms, get one friend and do the same. I would like this interview to go as far as it possibly can. Scott, we'll talk again. And thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day.